Hello, everyone. Thanks again for watching the Cast. This is our fourth one. Glad to be here. We may or may not have some others joining us. Don't worry, I will speak for a full 90 minutes if I have to. Oh, I'm already getting texts. Wow. Okay. Well, we're just going to have to let that one go. Where was I? Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about George Orwell and Aldous Huxley and their respective dystopian novels, and ask the question: which one was, um, a better predictor of where we're at today? And since I'm carrying the conversation on my own, you're only going to hear my viewpoint, which it's not bad. It's a pretty well reasoned viewpoint. But I do have to keep my eyes on some of the other, my email and texts and stuff, because I have, if someone contacts me that I thought might join us, I'm going to have to figure out a way to get them on. So if you happen to hear me break off, it's because I'm trying to help someone join the program as a guest, not as a participant. So before I get into talking about the merits of the premise, the thesis, who is a better predictor of things. We got George Orwell. I guess it's kind of hard to read, isn't it? It says George Orwell 84. Honest. Oh, there you go. Or Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. I got it for $2. These two books, for some reason, are often put in contrast, probably because the two lived at roughly the same time. They had somewhat similar experiences. And the reason why we're talking about something like this and not say like what's going on in the Trump universe right now is because one of the things that I want to do in this podcast is I want to go and take the deal with ideas. I don't want to be locked into whatever the quote national conversation is, because the people who determine what the national conversation is might be people that I just don't think ought to be making that decision. And there's just so much content, so many conversations of the past that still have relevance today. And one of the purposes of this podcast is to explore those and possibly show how they are still relevant today. Also, I should mention that if you want to be a guest on this, I mean, pretty much, well, not. I mean, as long as I don't think you're a raving lunatic, I'll let you join me. You can come in on like a, with your head in your face and talk that way. We'll be talking heads together, or you can call in and I'll put you on speaker, that kind of thing. Um, Lots of different ways that we can do it, and I don't even have to know you. Like, obviously, we have to make some connection. You need to send me a message on my X account, for example, which is Gutenberg Press. The link is in the description, or it ought to be, or it will be, if I've forgotten. Um, so just message me and say, "Hey, yeah, I want to be on one of your shows as a guest, and we'll make it happen." I'm also taking ideas. If you've got things that you would like me to talk about, my goal is to do these programs at least twice a week, or possibly on a Tuesday, Wednesday basis. It's a little bit flexible, but basically at this time, 6:30 Central Time to 8 o'clock. So you just open up your schedule and contact me and say, hey, I want to get plugged in, and we'll work out the topic, and we'll have a conversation. Could probably have at least another two people join us. Three might be pushing it, I think, but you know, the three of us could have a good conversation. So that gives you a little bit of idea of what the vision for this podcast is. To enter into past conversations and show how they could be relevant today. So, again, pardon me as I have to check my messages. I don't have a producer or something who can do this for me, so kind of have to keep an eye on whether or not someone says, "Hey, I'm ready to join," kind of a thing. So, I think first we need to have at least a brief summary of what these two books are about, in case you haven't read them or um, yeah. So let's start with A Brave New World. This one right here. So it's set in the future. I don't know, 500 years in the future. And what you have is a society that's basically been broken up into different classes of humans. And some humans, the highest are the alpha, and then the epsilon are the lowers. They're like your menial laborers, that kind of thing. Um, and no one has procreation in the conventional sense anymore. Uh, Children are basically created in the tube. Everyone's a test tube baby in this world, and each one is genetically designed when it goes into the tube to come out at a certain way. Like if they know that their civilization is going to need more leaders, they'll have more alpha humans. If they need more workers, they'll have more epsilon. And you got the betas, the gammas, the deltas. I don't actually remember what all of them do. Um, I've read both of these books several times, but it's been over the years, and I only sort of skim through them again to refresh myself. So if I get any, particular detail wrong, don't hurt me so much. But essentially, the world of A Brave New World is like it's super technologically. It's a technological scientific utopia, right? The scientists are in charge, and the people are kept happy by being allowed to have drugs. This is the way they occupy their time, is to have drugs, and of course they can have sex, but not resulting in children. That's all like you know. I already covered that. So everything is fine in this world. Everything is great. I should say it's sort of like there's an industrial kind of notion to it. It's kind of like this world state is like almost like a giant factory where every part has its place. Everyone is a cog or whatnot in the system, and you know that's how it's able to function so efficiently. So they do have in this world, they have an area of the world that they've carved out to be a place where uh, like a reservation, like for savages, or the people who are not on the program. And it's a smaller community. Obviously, it's set off from everybody else, and they like go to the people of this world, the world state will go to this reservation to check it out, almost like it's a safari, right? And one thing leads to another, and they find out that one of the children is actually um, the son of the director of this whole world government, and that's bad because he was not supposed to have sex leading to procreation, right? So he has to resign, and they bring the woman and his son, John, back to the world government, and then chaos ensues, right? Because you've got thrown into this this sterile, efficient environment where people are just they're being controlled by pleasure, either through soma or sexual activity, without any kind of boundaries or limits. They're just allowed to, all of the consequences to that kind of sexual behavior are completely removed. So they're just free to do whatever they want. But then John from the Savage Reservation comes in and sees this, and he just cannot cope with this. So his mom eventually overdoses on this soma. Now, I did not look this up, but soma is actually the Greek word for body. And when Jesus says in the New Testament scriptures of the Christians that this is my body, the word there is soma. And I have to think that there's a connection there. I don't know for sure that there is. I've never researched it, but it seems too striking to me that yeah, and if that is true, the ramifications, this idea that in this world they've called their drug that sedates them and brings them pleasure, the very thing that Jesus said is, the thing that helps them become like him. You are what you eat, kind of a thing. So it's definitely something to explore there someday. Maybe I will. At any rate, out of this pleasure paradise, you've got this lone crazy guy, John, who becomes very upset about things, and all the people kind of gather around to see this because they've never seen anything like this. And finally he just kills himself. So that's kind of like a Brave New World. You've got sort of this hyper industrial scientific society that is like supercharged efficient in kind of every way. And when you put the traditionalist in there, he can't survive. He can't cope, and that's the end. So now let's compare that to Brave New World. Um, so Orwell, what I find interesting before I give the overview on this, and I guess I don't quite know the backstory quite as much with Aldous Huxley. But Orwell was like a really do I dare use the word devout socialist? Like he really embraced socialism, but he really hated communism, and he hated totalitarianism, and which is ironic because if we look back over time, um, we don't necessarily make hard distinctions on those things. Obviously, in Europe, you've got the democratic socialists, which, I mean, I guess maybe that's where Orwell would have gone with it. But he really hated communism. So I think we have to bear that in mind as when we read 1984. But basically, I'm just giving a summary of this before I opine on it. You have so the main character is a guy who what is his job? His job is to alter the historical records. Yes, the Ministry of Truth. Yeah. So for example, like history continually changes over and over again in the course of the life of the people who live in the world of 1984. And so the one example that I remember is who they're at war with. So like they're always told that they were told that Oceania is at war with Eurasia, and that they've always been at war with Eurasia. But the problem is this guy, the main character Winston, he kind of has a vague recollection of when he remembers that actually they were not at war with Eurasia. And so like he's like something's not right here. But you have a highly monitored, tightly controlled, rigid society with the party making sure that um, no thought is out of place. Everybody is towing the line, and even having thoughts that deviate from what is accepted is considered to be criminal. The infamous thought crimes, right? So even in your head, even in your own mind, um, strictly speaking, you are carefully monitored. Now, the way that they carefully monitor is through like TVs that can like watch you, and cameras everywhere, and so or kids tattle on you, on the parents, that kind of thing. So, which is kind of ironic because at the time the technology to do that was nowhere to be really envisioned. What is? Isn't that what? I'm getting harassing texts now, but now we have the technology, and it is possible to be monitored through our phones, right? Through our screens. So it's really kind of remarkable that Orwell is able to foresee that kind of technological advancement. Um, but once again, in this world, it's kind of strange. The whole idea of sexuality, that no one's supposed to have close relationships with anybody else. It's all just supposed to be. It's almost animalistic. Like you have your sex, you get in, you get out. No attachments, no consequences. And actually, the way it's presented is for somebody who um, deviates from that, that's like the sign of somebody who's going to be trouble, right? So everyone's got to be basically towing the party line on everything. So Winston, the main character, he unfortunately for him sees a pretty woman, and it starts to jar him. It starts to mess with his mind a little bit. In his business, his job is as at the Ministry of Truth, where he like alters history on the fly, and then the new history gets propagated into the schools and through the TV, so that after a couple days or weeks or however long it was, people forget what it used to be, and now all they do is they remember what the official line is. But he's noticing all this. He The woman he's checking out has been checking him out, and one thing leads to another, yada 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 yada, and now we've got a real problem for Winston. He's living a very dangerous life that the party would not at all tolerate. So you can guess what's going to happen. He's going to get arrested. They're going to catch him. He's betrayed. I'm leaving out kind of some important things, but this is just meant to be a summary. Uh, Maybe I even shouldn't share that part, like how it ends with the woman. Um, sure, why not? So um, he's arrested. He's tortured. He's brainwashed. He tries to put up a fight, but finally he's going to endure the worst tortures, the worst thing that he can imagine, and that is to have his face eaten by rats while he's still alive. And at that moment, he finally gives in, and he begs that his captors put the rats on the girl's face instead of his. Right? That's love. But he's broken. He's a broken man at this point, and so he turns on the woman that he loves. He wants her to be tortured. He wants her face to be devoured by rats. And at that, they let him go because that's all they wanted. They just wanted to break him. And now, at the very end, he is a loyal servant to Big Brother. So we've got two entirely different worlds. There's not much by way of violence in A Brave New World. Not certainly not like in 1984. In 1984, there's um, It's controlled by fear and coercion, and dissent is not permitted by by force of the law, tortured and killed if necessary to prevent anyone from exhibiting any kind of individuality or any kind of devotion or attachment to anything other than the state. And in a Brave New World, you have the same thing. You have the same devotion to the state above all things. But to accomplish it, they don't use fear. They use drugs, sex, drugs, and I guess rock and roll. I guess. Whoa, which book has the movie, the Feelsy movies? That was, I'm kind of losing track now. I think that was Brave New World, wasn't it? The movies where they go in and they actually have physical sensations too. Anyway, but the point is they don't really have to shoot anyone in a Brave New World. Everyone just goes along with it because they have all the pleasures that they want. And if they're a worker or if they are one of the administrators, it doesn't matter. They're bred to be happy in whatever state that they are. And in both books, the problem begins when you are exposed to some sort of mark of individual passion, and it must be there must be there's a common insight where usually what brings it out, all the problems are the women. Right, it's the pretty women that are the causes of all of our problems. It is the pretty woman like Troy and Helena, that brings everything down. It brings down the Soviet system. It brings down the world of a Brave New World. Um, I don't know. After what is it? What was it called? I forget. I forget what they call it, but it was like a world state basically. So in these two scenarios, it's kind of interesting um, to think about, which one really succeeded, because on the one hand, I mean, on the face of it, we're not really living in a world that's totalitarian in nature, or are we? Right? Um, the worst forms of in both of these dystopians have not really shown themselves in American life, at least. But I think that in certain places and times, 1984 has been the reality. It's been the life. I think of places like Cambodia under Pol Pot. Very, it was very rigorously forced that people are going to obey the communist line. That was kind of 1984-ish. Pol Pot didn't have access to cell phones that could monitor people's conversations in real time. But had it been possible to use it, I think he would have. I don't think we've had a civilization. I'm kind of thinking here real quick. Like no society that I can think of has like said, you know what, we're gonna try to control people by drugging them. Um, not overtly, not overtly. Uh, I know there are people who are gonna be watching this who when they hear that, little like, whoa, wait, hold on, just a minute. This is an extremely, even America is extremely medicated. Um, you know, but I'm saying it as an overt policy of a government where they did not mind hiding it. I don't think that exists yet anywhere in history, and I'm thinking I don't think it's there yet. So I think we could come up with some fairly close comparisons with 1984 into the real world, but not quite so much for Brave New World, which might mean something. So before I get into like really diving into that, one of the things that is interesting is that somebody has already weighed in on this. Aldous Huxley actually had an opinion on this. I see a comment here. Oh, Well, thank you for that contribution. There are two origins for the word soma. So if you're just joining me, I was making uh, reflecting on the use of the word soma in the Brave New World as the like calming drug. So someone in the chat says, yeah, in the Greek it's soma, which means body, but there's another one from the Sanskrit, which is a intoxicating drink used in ritual and believed to be the drink of the gods. I did not know that. Now, commentator, do you happen to know, did Huxley deliberately choose soma in reference to the Sanskrit? You can kind of chime in on that if you want as I go. So that would be something that that would be new to me and good to know. While he's doing that, um, Huxley himself received a copy of 1984 from Orwell and wrote a letter to Orwell about it. And basically, Huxley is going to say, as you might suspect, my dystopian was better than your dystopian. Okay. Commentator says Huxley is mentioned in the Sanskrit definition of soma. Okay. Good to know. I will pursue that. So, oh man, you know what? I did not mention the sponsor of this episode yet. It's here, I'll make it really big so we don't even miss it. Oh my gosh. But I'm still there. It's ridiculous. Jesse Seed and Bed and Sheol are two books that we published through my company by Sam Packin. You can get these books on Amazon and other places too. And even though these books are set in the World War II, and the one guy ends up as a prisoner of war, uh, the fact that he's sponsoring this episode on dystopias is purely coincidental. He's just a longtime supporter of everything that we do, and we're going to make sure that he gets the exposure. And you can support this podcast by buying pretty much anytime I mention something, you should go buy it. I mean, mention something that like we publish, go buy it right away. Don't even hesitate. That'll be great, greatly appreciated. Okay, so let's move that out of the way, and let's bring up this letter. Again, I don't have a producer here, so it's just me fumbling through it. So I don't think we necessarily have to read it all. You can read it yourself. It's easy to find online, but we'll highlight some points here. Make sure that I don't lose my window. There we go. So this is what Huxley thinks. Um, this sentence here. This paragraph here. I think in its own way, like it distills into like it's like a perfect illustration of why I'm trying to have a podcast that talks about things that go beyond like 1 second's worth of today's news. Like we see a 8 second clip on the television or in a commercial or whatever, and suddenly we're thinking about like chaff, like shallow things, and we never get to the real things, and it's always one thing after another. This is a reference here. He is talking about, he says the ultimate revolution, and I would say he's just talking about 1984 as being about the ultimate revolution, but I think he's also saying his own book is too, right? And actually, that's a little bit lower here. My own belief is that the ruling oligarchy will find less arduous and wasteful ways of governing and of satisfying its lust for power and these ways will resemble those which I described in Brave New World. But it's still the same thing. It's still like they both have this ultimate revolution. And I think this is remarkable, really, that you have in among the now I'm gesturing and no one can see me gesture. That's kind of ridiculous. My hand is moving around. I'm gesticulating wildly right now. You have people out there, and they've been around for a long time, who are trying to achieve this ultimate revolution, and he traces it back to Marquis de Sade. I don't know. Is French. I don't even know if does anyone even know how to pronounce French names. I don't know. I'm pretty sure Marquis is right. Marquis de Sade. But I do know that this is the guy who inspired the notion of sadism. So that gives you some idea of who that person is. And he's basically saying, yeah, your idea, my idea, it goes back 50 or 60 years, however far back you have to get to Marquis de Sade, which I used to know. I think it's maybe about 100 years. Um, and it's all about these elites who are trying to cut through the violence of history and bring world peace, and they're willing to consider just about any way of doing that, so long as that it works. And you almost can't blame them. I feel like I have to put my face here. Whoa. Oh no, that's come here, you. Stop it. We'll put me over here a little bit. There we go. That's better, right? If you look at world history of the 1800s, and obviously of the 1900s up through like the World War II, right? Which is when these people were writing. Brave New World was in the 30s, and Orwell wrote his book, I believe, in 45, 47, somewhere in there. If you look back even like 20 or 30 years at that time, the world is a mess, right? It's like you are walking around ankle deep in the blood of humanity. Almost every turn, it makes sense that people would start thinking about how can we corral this and finally have a world where maybe people don't have all of their rights or the individual freedoms that they have, but at least they're not getting slaughtered and shoved into ovens and burned. So you can almost understand that instinct. Personally, I hate it, but to be fair, again, one of the reasons why I hate that whole mindset is because I can look back and see what the 20th century was like when they tried to implement that, especially in the Soviet countries. It did not work, and that was one of the things that Orwell was noticing too when he wrote 1984. It was that, hey, this communism thing, this form of socialism was not working, and he was already seeing that in the 40s. He died, I think, in 1950. So he did not even have the benefit of the 75 years of history that we have access to in order to make that conclusion. Which, if you did, you'd have of course, Lenin's purges would have happened. Stalin's purges, the Holodomor in the Ukraine. I guess they would have had that as a possible reference point, although that was um, not as widely known yet because it was suppressed even in the West. Um, but then, of course, we have the Cultural Revolution in China with Mao and his little red book. I've already mentioned Pol Pot. Uh, there's other places too. The invasion of Hungary by the Soviet Union to put down a rebellion there. So we can look back and we can say pretty definitively that communism as a method to bring world peace, not a good option. Not so good at all. So anyway, even though I don't like that instinct, I do want to be fair and honest and say I can understand why people had that instinct. So anyway, moving on with this letter here. His conclusion, I already highlighted. We'll highlight it again. He believes that the ruling oligarchy will find less arduous and wasteful ways of governing and of satisfying its lust for power, and these ways will resemble those which I described in Brave New World. Now, if you hang with me just for a couple minutes, I want to give you some more hard evidence of the climate in which he was speaking of that prompted him to say such things. But I wanted to kind of skip down here. Let's see, there was something else. This isn't it. It's in the last paragraph, but this is relevant to what I want to talk about anyway. So now he's reflecting on the people of the 19th century, the people who created all these utopian visions of world peace and one world government that they really thought was going to pull it off. But he says that they were not, partly because of their materialism, which is interesting, and partly because of prevailing respectability. 19th century philosophers and men of science were not able to investigate the outer facts of psychology for practical men, such as politicians, soldiers, and policemen, to apply in the field of government. So essentially, what he's saying is that for a variety of reasons, one of them being materialism, that the scientists were not able to come up with a workable utopian concept because they hadn't really delved into the psyche of humans themselves, like the normal people. And unlike them, he's saying, in his day and age, they are. They are ready to really understand what humans are and use that information and tweak humans in such a way that they will become governable by these elites. What was it? Well, how did he describe them? It was up there. The leaders. I don't know what he called them. Where it is, the ruling oligarchy, right? That's yeah. So there you go. That's what democracy looks like, I guess. So anyway, his bottom line is I'll just go through the whole paragraph. He says within the next generation, and remember he's writing this 1949. Within the next generation, so let's do some math. That would be approximately 1950 to, let's say, 1980, give or take. I believe the world's rulers will discover that infant conditioning and hypnosis are more efficient as instruments of government than clubs and prisons, and that the lust for power can be just as completely satisfied by suggesting people into loving their servitude as by flogging and kicking them into obedience. So loving people into their servitude. That's optimistic, right? And hey, if people are voluntarily becoming slaves, who can complain about that? Well, who could object if someone signs up to be a slave, right? And they will with the right kind of conditioning, I guess, and drugs. In other words, I feel the nightmare of 1984 is destined to modulate into the nightmare of a world having more resemblance to that which I imagined in Brave New World. In other words, my dystopia is better than yours. The change will be brought about as a result of a felt need for increased efficiency. Now, I almost set myself on a tangent here because efficiency is one of those things that triggers me. We'll say Of course, he notes there may be a large scale biological and atomic war, in which case it doesn't really matter, right? So remember at that time in 1949, the Cold War was just starting, and it is interesting to think about the biological war uh, prospects, which we don't think about as much as we should even right now, which is ironic, I think, after COVID. Um, what with the prevailing theory that's out there that COVID was released from. I'm sorry, did I say released? I meant accidentally escaped from a Chinese bioweapons lab. Uh, it is something that they used to think about a lot, and I've thought about a lot for a long time, and we should not stop thinking about it. Uh, I'm gonna get into current events here a little bit, but like, surely you all just saw the Trump um, made some announcement about 500 billion dollars for an AI investment or something or another. I might be conflating news stories, but like they want to have use modern biological technologies to end cancer and things like that, mRNA type things. To me, that's scary talk. Like um, that's the kind of thing that is another segment. We'll just wait. So I still have yet to give you my verdict. I understand that. But I want to give you a little bit more context before I give my verdict. Like to help viewers understand that this was not just a couple of random ideas that these two authors had at the time, but that they were sourced from the real world that they were interacting with. Now, the examples that I'm going to give may or may not be people that they actually did interact. Like they might not know these people in particular that I'm going to be citing, but it was the ethos of the time. In fact, a good way of introducing yourself to what I'm talking about is to read The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. I talked about this book in yesterday's podcast. Actually, I invoked it. I didn't really describe it, but essentially, it's the same kind of thing. Lewis is calling attention to this class of people who considers themselves elitists and superior to everybody else, and they, in their great benevolence, are going to manage society in such a way, again, to have world peace. But in doing so, they'll actually abolish mankind. There will no longer be men. We're just conditioned animals with certain individuals who are no longer human either, being the overseers of the rest of civilization. So again, The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis was written at roughly the same time as these, and again, he was absorbing the same kind of comments and commentary and discussions from the elites that Huxley and Orwell were. So let's talk about a couple of these real quick. Now, this is going to be a little hard to read, I guess. This is I'll move myself over a little bit more. This is something that I have posted on a website that I actually manage, eugenicsarchive.com. It's one of my websites. I think my face is still going to be in the way. I get that a lot. So let's just move it over. Here, you'll see my arm in case I decide to gesture wildly. You'll have some clue that I am. So here we go. This is Alexis Carrel, um, who was at a time a devout Darwinian, and I'm gonna kind of jump through these. You can find these later. The website is eugenicsarchive.com. I guess I don't. Yeah. Anyway, so here's the bottom line. In a word, children must be conditioned. Um, so just like a dog, right? He's comparing it to a dog here. He says, a child can accumulate vast treasures of unconscious knowledge. He is easily trained, incomparably more so than the most intelligent shepherd dog. And, he continues along that line in the next paragraph. I have it bolded already. The ringing of a bell, the report of a gun, even the crack of a whip become for a dog the equivalent of the food that he likes. A similar phenomenon takes place in man. Oh, let's see, we could really go on here. How are we going to condition this human? We can direct the intellectual shaping of a child with proper teachers, suitable books, and introduce his into his inner world the ideas destined to influence the evolution of his tissues and his mind. But they're the ones in charge. They're the ones that are guiding this, right? Um, who's doing it? Well, I don't even think I want to get into this too much here. There's just way too much content in this. It'd be way too thick. The point is here's Alex Carroll, Nobel Prize winner, who is advocating for the conditioning of children, right? And you can read what he says. Now, to be fair and to be honest about poor Carroll here, um, he had a change of heart at some point. He ended up rejecting a lot of this and actually abandoned his agnosticism and became a Christian, a Catholic, I believe. And then his approach changed radically. But this is all before that. So here you have a guy, he was world famous at the time, talking about how we need to condition the children. Let's look at the next one. This is one of my favorites. So this guy here. So if you were watching my podcast yesterday where I was talking about the secret of NIM, and the NIM is the National Institute of Mental Health. Uh, One of the forerunners of that organization, the as far as like who the people were and stuff, are the people that this guy was hanging out with, the National Council of Mental Hygiene. So this guy again is talking about he wants to shape society. He wants to take the reins of human civilization and bring about peace. Okay. And he knows that what he proposes would be resisted. So here's what in fact, here, look at this paragraph. Since the last World War, we have done much to infiltrate the various social organizations throughout the country. He wants to embed the principles into society, and he knows that people are going to resist it. He has to infiltrate. So down here, this whole paragraph is worth reading. If we are to infiltrate the professional and social activities of other people, I think we must imitate the totalitarians and organize some kind of fifth column activity. If better ideas on mental health are to progress and spread, we, as the salesmen, must lose our identity. In other words, they cannot present themselves as who they are. By that I mean we cannot help so effectively if speaking for a national council or any other body as we can when we make a more subtle approach adapted to the particular circumstances of the moment. It really wouldn't hurt if no one ever heard of this council again, provided that the work was done. Let us all, therefore, very secretly, be fifth columnists. So, how do you do this? How does he do the infiltration? I thought this was quite telling. the easiest places uh, to imprint their ideas for managing society are the teaching professions and the church. So again, this is what year was this? This is 1940. This is the dawn of the era. Now, if I was a teacher or a member of the church and I heard someone talking about like this, I would ask myself, what you have here, you have somebody who's part of this national organization back in the 40s, mind you, but they morphed into other organizations that carried the ball, talking about how they need to infiltrate these organizations to promote a worldview that they know that if they were honest about, it would be rejected. We are now a couple generations after this. I would want to know if it was me. Hey, am I doing that? Am I like part of their plan? Am I carrying out and implementing their plan? Am I conveying ideas that I would find reprehensible if they were stated plainly? And if so, how do I get rid of them? How do I detect them? That sort of thing. That's why I think conversations like this are really kind of so important, because if we're always looking at what the national conversation is, I was using my hand gestures again, we can forget that there were national conversations 70 years ago and they put things into motion back then that we might still be coping with even today without even knowing it. Especially when you got a guy like this who's like saying, we have to actually hide it. Anyway, this is so dense we really can't get into it. But like here, we had probably be secretive and not mention the council. That's the council, mental hygiene. But only write as speak as individuals. Don't let us even mention mental hygiene. Let's appeal to common sense. Yeah, there's efficiency again. Let's go on to the next one because it'd be a lot easier. I mean, I could talk about this stuff for a long time. So the next one, this is Julian Huxley. Julian Huxley, I don't know if that's the name you're familiar with. He was related to Aldous Huxley, the very same one that we were talking about. He was one of the persons who helped create the neo-Darwinian synthesis, which found a way, at least theoretically and hypothetically, to reconcile Darwinism with modern genetics at the time. Uh, and so obviously that was a pretty big accomplishment for him, and he's known for that. He also was someone who really pushed for the creation of the United Nations. I believe he founded UNICEF, if I remember correctly. Uh, but here's that mindset. Okay, let me just double check something here real quick. Hopefully, after I get done with this, you'll see how it relates to the discussion about A Brave New World. This is Julian Huxley now, the uncle, I think, of Aldous Huxley. I think it even says it here. I do not. Okay. The increasing complexity of modern societies demands an increasing number of men and women of great ability and high competence to run them. It should be a prime duty of our educationalists to meet this demand. For this, genetics, and by this he's referring to eugenics in a different, like not overtly, but yeah, genetics and education must join hands. We need a comprehensive selection system to catch as many potential geniuses and top people as possible. These would be the alphas, right? These are the alphas of A Brave New World. But he's writing this a couple decades after A Brave New World. Top people as possible. And once caught, we must give them an education designed to help and permit them to realize their capacities to the full. Failure to do this will lead to a running down of national efficiency, This is the third article that all three of these articles have talked about efficiency and national achievement. It would also be a lamentable waste of that most valuable of human resources, mental and spiritual power. He was an atheist. He doesn't mean anything like yeah. And will prevent many potential geniuses from developing their precious talents. So this is the world, the backdrop of ideas that Orwell and Huxley were writing in. What were presented in a fictional format in those two books were actually the real talk, the real national conversations granted in the council rooms of like this one right here. This one was this was at the annual meeting for the National Council for Mental Hygiene. It's not like he published this in the newspaper. Hey, we have to sneak in and trick people into believing us. No, he didn't announce that. He did. These are conversations they had with each other, but there are people that both Huxley and Orwell would have interacted with. They maybe not these specific people, but people like that. And so now we live in a world where the people like this, people like Julian Huxley or Colonel Reese or Alex Carroll have created. They created it, they established it, they built it, they created the United Nations, they formed UNICEF. Julian Huxley said, hey, we've got to find the geniuses, we need to set them apart because they're going to be the ones who rule everybody else. The alphas, right? The alphas, which by obviously that means conversely that there's going to be subhumans, as it were, the epsilons, the laborers. And if you look carefully at even the national conversation today, there are certain members of the world that right now you'll hear people say, well, if you get rid of those people, who's going to mow your lawn? Who's going to do your plumbing? It's the same thing. Dare I say, it's the same damn thing. And I don't mean that as a swear term. I mean that as exactly the way that word ought to be used. It's the same damned thing. I really hate it. All right, so let's move these things aside here and get myself back on the screen, and then I'm going to talk about the verdict. Which of these two dystopias most came true? See here, get rid of that. Where's my face? Oh boy, scary. Here we go. Oh no, I just got really large. How awkward. And let's get our sponsor in here. Sort of, there we go. Okay. If you're wondering, it's not whiskey that I'm drinking tonight, it's rum. So we have about 30 minutes here. So just so everyone knows, in about 15 minutes, no, in about 10 minutes, I'm going to give people the opportunity to ask questions or make comments, and I will react and respond to them. So the chat room is over there. Just remember that there's a slight delay, and I might not see when your comment comes in, and I might not recall exactly what I was saying when you made your comment. Let's see, just check here real quick. I really hope the other folks who were thinking about joining me didn't try to contact me during this, because it's really hard for me to monitor all that and do this. So you're going to have a chance to ask your questions and comments, so be thinking about them. There are people who believe that Huxley was right. We are a drug society. We have resorted to pleasures to keep us subdued. There's a very like matrixy feel to it. This might be the third time that I've talked about that scene from the Matrix in this podcast series so far. The one where Agent Smith is telling Neo about how they had other incarnations of the Matrix, but they were too perfect, and the people just went nuts, and they it was horrible, didn't work. Instead, they had to create a universe with conflict and tension in order for people to be happy and have meaning. Um, it's the in that scenario, right? Like in the Matrix, they had to find a way to make it so that people were happy with their situation, and so that they would not think about their situation and possibly escape it, right? And so that's kind of that is what has been done to the people of a Brave New World. Is they've basically been raised in the test tube, from the test tube, to in their different classes as alphas, betas, gammas, epsilon, or whatever. And that's all they ever know. And the moment they have any kind of thought about it, here comes Soma to dull all the questions. They can have as much sex as they want, have all the pleasures they want, no consequences, and society just keeps on going. And so, how do you wake up from that? So, in a Brave New World, the way that they wake up from that is they have an excursion to the safari, and they see the savage, the people who are living like wild people. And let me just say that I resonate with the character of John. That's the name of the savage in Brave New World, the one that comes off the reservation, the savage reservation. I really, that's me. And except for the part where he hangs himself, that's not me. Um, but when I look at modern society and I see how it's built and how it's structured and how it's kept under control, I'm like, no, take me to the reservation, man. I don't want any part of that. Um, I don't want to be the slave. I want to be the master, even if it's of my very, very, very small kingdom with which has no powers whatsoever. At least it's my kingdom. So I really resonate with that. So what's it going to take for everybody else? I think to wake up. Well, I think this is again one of the reasons why having some grasp of history beyond what we see on television or hear on social media, by reading some of these old books, go back to the 1800s and see how these people like lived and how they thought, and the things that were important to them. They're not quite the same as what we think today. And I don't want to get into it too much, but the Huxley was talking about basically creating a society that was industrial. It's almost like a factory, and you keep all the workers in their place by keeping them satiated with drugs of different kinds. And a lot of people, if yeah, okay. So I haven't actually read that, but I will quickly acquire it. Thank you for that comment. Someone just recommended or said it was similar to City of Domes and Logan's Run, which I've heard about, but it's not been on my list yet to watch. But on the other hand, I think that a lot more of 1984 has come true than perhaps anyone has realized. Like, we live in a time when history is often being rewritten right in front of us, and we're not supposed to notice it. Uh, I'm almost afraid to bring this up, because even though I am a Christian and the things that I publish are Christian, this is not supposed to be an explicitly Christian or religious kind of podcast. But and and frankly, what I'm describing isn't shouldn't be construed only as that anyway, which is kind of my point. It was only 30 years ago that it would have been unheard of that there could be something like gay marriage, right? And then how quickly did that happen? In living memory, right? In living memory, it happened. Um, from 2000, we'll say 7 to 2012, within a 5-year period, suddenly that's the reality that we live in, right? And it's almost to the point where you can't even remember a time where it was anything else. But I was alive then, and probably a lot of my viewers were alive during that transition, and it just happened to us, and we were told, like, there's this almost historical revisionism oh yeah, this is an inevitable historical arc and trajectory in human rights. And if you think perhaps that it was manufactured, well, don't look at the man behind the curtain, kind of thing. And it was manufactured, by the way. If you want as a reference, there's a book called After the Ball. Look it up. This transition that I just described was socially engineered, but I digress. And hey, if a society decides on its own free will or whatever that they're going to accept gay marriage and they're going to bring it about fair and square, who can object? But if it's something that's been manipulated and socially engineered, and people don't even know that it's being done to them, that I have a problem with. Something else that A Brave New World, 1984 has this idea of like thought crimes, right? Uh, like you're not even allowed to have. This is what the whole like woke stuff is about, right? Like you're not even allowed to have. Hit my microphone. Ideas that are outside this narrative, and they fence you in by, it's called the Overton window, right? These are the ideas that you're allowed to consider and talk about in polite discourse. Uh, and if you deviate, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi, you're a bigot, you're a racist. So basically, if you have a view today which was mainstream in 1985, you're still a fascist, right? You're as bad as Hitler, even though it was like a mainstream view within our lifetimes. Not even within our lifetimes, only like 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, it was a mainstream view, and now suddenly it's fascist. That's like the whole thought crime thing, or newspeak, I believe was one of the words that are in there. Um, in both scenarios, I think it's really important or noteworthy that both in 1984 and in Brave New World, they recognize how central sexuality is to changing and reshaping society. And so in other words, this is like an open secret. Like the social engineers know this and they're using it against us. And I really feel like, in a lot of ways, that this is going on even now. Um, I'm kind of getting. I don't want to talk about that. It's like a whole nother topic. But I think coming at off of the whole COVID experience, I think a lot of people would agree that the whole 1984 thing. Actually, we're not so far away from that as maybe we thought. So what's my verdict? My verdict is not that one or the other um, was superior to the other. I think they both are equally have weight. They both have compelling things about them. And in fact, I've been considering writing something, maybe I don't know if it'd be my own piece of fiction or not, uh, but something kind of to convey the idea that actually all the dystopians are true. They all have important elements of truth to them, even though they like fixate on certain parts of them. And so I went to my shelf and I pulled off some of my dystopian books. Yes, I left some on the shelf. Among the Hidden, written for children. This is a book that the premise of the book is that you're not allowed to have more children than the state allows, and it's considered selfish and against the law to grow your own food. Everyone's got to have their food managed by the state, and you need to be content with it. And you can't have more food than your family is allotted. I can easily see that. I can easily envision a scenario where food is rationed in the future for population, but not setting that aside. This idea that you should only have a certain amount of children, that definitely is an undercurrent of our society, right? If you have 4 kids, you're like, oh, are you Catholic? You know, kind of a thing. You're really only expected to have 2. It's not a law, it's not a rule. It's just a cultural current. So I can see elements of truth to that one. Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand. Actually, I have not heard her name well enough. Again, it's the suppression of individuality at the expense on behalf of uh, devotion to the state. Ayn Rand. Thank you. Thank you for that. Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand. Okay. I love this little book. It's not very long. You can get through it really quickly. And she's an atheist. She hated C.S. Lewis, whom I love. So I do kind of hold that against her. Um, but again, it's like the main character sort of finds out by accident that there's a whole life of the mind outside of the state. In all these scenarios so far, the 2 books that I've talked about, plus now these 2 books, peace and tranquility is guaranteed only by virtue of the fact that no one is ever allowed to contemplate other thoughts or interact with them. 1984, they had double think. You're not even allowed to think these things in Brave New World. They're drugged to death. Yeah, so same idea with them. The very worst thing that you could do, according to the people of this mindset, is even encounter an idea that is outside the Overton window, and they decide what is in the Overton window. We the Living, also by Ayn Rand. I'm being corrected again. Ayn. Her name is Ayn. That's how you pronounce it? Come on. Surely you jest. I'm getting feedback in the comments on how to say Ayn Rand's name. Ayn, apparently. I once heard someone say, don't make fun of someone who pronounces a word wrong, because it just means that they have learned it by reading, and that should never be something that they're made to be ashamed of. So that's what I'm going to go with. Anyway, We the Living. So Ayn Rand was someone who escaped the Soviet Union, hated communism. And what's interesting about this book is, again, like, so she's like the ultimate, she's like beyond libertarian, right? She's like an objectivist. Don't want to get involved in that conversation, but like again, like, she calls attention to how the Soviets really made an emphasis on trivializing sexuality and trivializing the whole idea of marriage and things like that. In fact, little known fact, one of the very first things that the Bolsheviks did was make no fault divorce part of the law, because they did not want people to have any. They did not want some people to have in their lives anyone who mattered to them more than the state itself did. Okay. So anyway, truth to that one. Here's one. Oh boy, we got Wolf Smasher. He's gonna correct me on this one too. Oh, kind of hard to read. The Plague by Albert Camus. Did I say that right? It's not Camus, I know that. I think it's Camus. It's another dystopian, which is, I picked this one up during the whole coronavirus nonsense, and it's a dystopian. And in this one, again, there's truth to it. You have this division between the people who need to be managed and the elites who alone know how to manage them. And ironically, he's on the side of the elites. But that's my own heavy-handed way of putting it, because I didn't like it. Fahrenheit 451. Again, The whole idea of having surely everyone watching this knows what this one is. It's the temperature that books burn at. Supposedly, I have not tested that scientifically, so please don't hold me to that. Um, but the idea is the exposure of the individual to ideas outside of what is accepted by the state, and you can see that um, by virtue of the kinds of books and articles and things that young people are asked to engage with in their education. The with To go back to Common Core, um, this is a while back now, right? There was an increased emphasis on of getting away from literature and teaching and having kids engage with technical manuals and things of that sort. Not by accident, I would say, and part and parcel of this idea of keeping people in a channel of thoughts. Um, OJ Wolf Smasher, you're not going to correct me on my pronunciation of Camus. Oh, wrong one. Camus. I'm disappointed. Fahrenheit 51. So now I've gone through about five other ones. Here's one. We'll all know this one. The Handmaid's The Handmaid's Tale. Okay, all right. Wolf Smasher doesn't know how to pronounce Camus, so we're all just gonna pronounce it however we want. Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. Now there's a lot about this particular book that made me laugh, um, like as being implausible. The premise of this is that these ultra Christian people who bear a strange resemblance to Mennonites who don't, or Amish who don't mind shooting people, which really seems, I really have trouble kind of putting those two ideas together, especially living in a community that has a lot of Mennonites and Amish. Uh, but at any rate, within this community, right, you've got like the genetically pure woman who's the only one allowed to procreate with certain men. And there's this again, the sexuality is like right in the middle of all of it. They're not allowed to have any kind of attachments to the people they're having sex with. It's all about the procreation. Now that I'm I think that actually there is truth to this one, but it's not with the totalitarian Amish, which always had trouble wrapping my head around, but rather the fact that it was actually the progressives of the early 1900s that wanted to have marriage certificates and carefully monitor who was having children and make sure that uh, the the genetically inferior were not having children. Again, go back to like Julian Huxley a little bit, where he explicitly said to have enough alpha people to manage society, genetics and education must join hands. So yeah, I do think there is even truth to this dystopian. Last one. Here's one I don't think anyone will know. This one is Winter Flight. So this one is it's been a long time since I read this one. I'd be a little bit worried about trying to represent it in detail, but essentially the idea is that people are only allowed to live a certain age. I think like 55 or something like that, and then they're expected to gracefully bow out, and by that I mean um, engage in physician assisted suicide. Um, and die and leave it to the rest of society. And if you're paying attention, you know that physician assisted suicide is something that is really coming along again. It was kind of on the outs, thanks to what Hitler did. But it's back in Canada. Like 1 in 5, don't hold me to it, but a lot. It's like a very high proportion. 1 in 5 people are dying from assisted suicide. In England, they're working to make it legal right now. So again, some truth to that dystopian. In other words, I think the reason why people write dystopians is because they see in the modern trends how if someone just takes those principles and extends them even just a little bit to their logical conclusion, there could be absolute mayhem that we would regret as society. So I am glad that we have these, and all of these different takes, even the Atwood one, which seems really strange to me. And I don't necessarily think that we have to put them in juxtaposition with each other, because I think that it's the nature of humanity, especially when we have this prevailing instinct right now. There's this idea out there that we have to have a managed society, and you've got these elites who are going to manage us. It just lends itself to abuse. It's just crying out to if these people ever have the power to enact these things, we're in serious trouble. And we have lots of authors who are been veritable prophets. They've seen these things coming for almost 100 years now. It would be foolish to dismiss them. And I hope sometime to have another conversation about this with other people who can join me on this, because I'm sure that we can have lots of conversation. So now we've got a comment. Let's react to that here. Um, Nolan and Nolan and Logan's Run focus on sex instead on recreation, decoupled from procreation through science. I really need to get a hold of that one. Yeah, I I think that we are almost how to. I hate to use the word Puritan because it lends itself right into what Atwood was talking about. we we normal people, the proletariat, we just sort of take life as it is, and we don't view the aspects of our life as possible levers of power to socially engineer. But the people that we're talking about, the alpha class, um, the Big Brother party, those people, who was it? Who was it? It was one of my people was talking about how when when we really understand the human psychosis or psychology, and get rid of our reservations about that. They're like all about what is it about humanity? What buttons can we press? What can we take advantage of? What can we manipulate? How can we condition? So we're at a disadvantage because on the one hand we got most of us just living our lives ready to be fulfill our dreams, meaning the meaning of life as well as we can accomplish it. And on the other hand, you got a group of people who are like, how can I use that to engineer society? And those people know very well how important and central sexuality is, about how central marriage is. They know what these things mean to a society and civilization. But instead of seeing it as something that's sort of like I don't want to say sacrosanct per se, but like something that we're just they see it as just another tool in the arsenal, and that puts us, I think, at a disadvantage. Any other questions or comments? I think I heard a text come in. Oh no, it was somebody who wanted to chime in. Oh, Blarney. Paul, are you still listening? We might give someone last couple words here if he's watching here. This is my friend Paul Westling. Paul, you're on speaker, man. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to
Yeah, I turned off the TV, so there's no feedback.
Okay. Yeah, well, let's add another 5 minutes to the show. Let's. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, as I sat here thinking, it seems like a perfect, like most of 1984. Like I would say that a bigger portion of 1984, I would say, has come true that I've seen over the past, definitely over the past 5 years.
Yeah.
Before that, I might have said that we were headed more towards Brave New World, where if you count entertainment as that drug that people are looking for, that um, those drugs, drugs that people are actually doing, the Oxycontin
Right.
epidemic, the fentanyl epidemic,
Right.
definitely those are elements that point towards Brave New World. But the the thought police, the woke culture, everything else points way more towards 1984 being the dystopian novel that came closer to fruition than the other one.
Yeah, it's really hard to have lived through the coronavirus thing without seeing the hints of 1984.
And if you look at a certain country where that COVID originated from, you definitely see more of 1984 happening there than a Brave New World. They're not controlling their people through pleasure. They're controlling their people through coercion.
Yeah, and interestingly, they're running into all sorts of problems because they've aborted so many women that the men, like the natural instinct that men have, they still have it, right? They still want to get married and have kids, even in the CCP, but there's no women to have it with, so there's a problem there. Central planning really screwed up.
Well, they just gotta convince their population, like they've convinced our population, that um, going down the Rainbow Road was a good idea,
Right.
and maybe they'll catch their they'll catch up with their
Yeah.
population and give them pleasure that way.
Right. That's very subtle. Yeah. Got to be quick around here. Well, I'm sorry I didn't see that in time. You should have said something in the chat over here, um, so we could get you in there. So how about next week? We definitely plan on getting you on here at more length. How does that sound?
Sure thing.
But I think it's fair we give you a real quick chance. You have your own YouTube channel, don't you?
I have been trying a YouTube channel. I've been taking a pause recently, but it's four random guys is the name of the YouTube channel,
Okay.
where I go out and interview people and have them answer six completely random questions, and try to get their feedback. And some of them are funny, some of them are kind of funny, and looking at me is always funny. So
Yes. Yeah. Well, I get that a lot myself, so I'm with you. All right. So, next week when we have you on, be prepared to talk a little bit more about that. That's one of the things that I want to do is give people a chance to pitch whatever they're doing. Um, so, thank you. I'm sorry for not catching your text in time, but
hey, no problem. I enjoyed the show, so uh, good luck in the future. I
okay.
think two of your viewers were me because I was viewing you. My wife was viewing you on her phone, and I was viewing you on the
Okay.
TV.
Well,
So
I'll be sure to mention that when well, unmute me after I hang up. Okay.
sure will.
Okay. All right. Bye.
All right, bye.
All right. We'll now give my friend Paul Wessling about 2 seconds to unmute me. I'm probably unmuted by now. I'm going to wrap this up, bring it to a close. Thank you for um, watching this. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm not going to go through and summarize all the things that I said at the very beginning. that introduces why I'm thinking about this. Instead, what I'll do is I'll invite you after this is done to go back to the beginning and hear it for yourself. Uh, it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway and I hate saying it because it seems so stupid. But for this podcast to succeed, need your help to spread the word, share it with people, help me come up with ideas, engage with me on coming up with ideas. I'm willing to put just about anybody on the show with me, as long as they're not too crazy and psycho. We'll give them a chance to talk about whatever their project is, and I'm happy to have like two other people at any given time. So we're gonna be doing this, God willing, twice a week, until I'm not saying that I want to be the next Joe Rogan or anything, but I wouldn't say no. But I can't get there without you, and I'm hoping that you'll do so. Subscribe, follow us on X, and I've been posting these also on Rumble at the same time. One of the things, just really, really quickly, the censorship on YouTube's always really bad. So I'm definitely creating the Rumble presence as a good healthy backup, and I'll be looking at that more in the future. So yeah, like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. That's all for tonight, and follow me on all the social media. I will let you know what our topic is for next Tuesday, and point people who ought to be on this program with me in my direction. Make them get connections with me, because as much as I like hearing myself talk, I know that it'll be a better experience if there's an exchange of ideas that are not just mine. Oh, yeah. And ding the notification bell. Yes, that's right. The notification bell. I only have one like. Someone is, hey, who did not hit the like button? I'm looking, I'm staring, I'm looking. Okay, I'm not going to, all right, whatever. All right. You can do it later when I'm not watching. Thanks again. Hope I'll see you all next week. That's it. That's all, folks. Good night.